We all know that if you anticipate pain, if you see it coming, it doesn't hurt so much, which is why the dentist says this is going to hurt a little bit and then it hurts a lot. And one of the problems, it's acknowledged, that we're facing at the moment is that the ups and downs in life are getting magnified as lockdown opens up because of the fact that you just can't tell where things are coming from. And whenever there's a government announcement, I now find that I'm bracing myself for the bad news that's the consequence of the good news, the ways in which life is going to get more rather than less complicated. And there have been a few things that got my attention this week. Our annual travel insurance renewal came through. I don't know whether we're going to be able to travel anyway, but we're going to renew our insurance. But it got a big red box at the top full of the things it wasn't going to cover, including fear of COVID. And that phrase, fear of COVID, stuck in my mind. They could have put it straight: if you want to go on holiday in the foreseeable, you're on your own, mate. And then one day this week, Wendy and I had an hour free in the late afternoon. We do have free time, but it's quite unusual for us to find that during the day our free time comes together. And just for fun, we decided to visit the famous Carn Beaversbrook maze. Now, if you don't live near Carn, this is also known as the Big Tesco. It's well known for being pretty disorienting when you're inside it. And I didn't find it as disorienting as it normally is. I think the arrows on the ground are a real help. You're less likely to get trapped in the yogurts waiting for a keeper to let you out. So we escaped with some stuff unscarred, but then Wendy said that there was somebody on Shout Out Carn complaining about people who had not been observing social distancing in Tesco's. And that made me wonder whether it was me. And if somebody was commenting on me, I'm sure it would have been that woman with the expensive handbag who was giving every item in the yellow label section a manual examination and holding up those of us who had other things to do with our lives. Anyway, that visit ended up on the negative side of feel good, feel bad. Then there's all this social distance in jeopardy. This diagram is just plain anxiety producing. And I don't know about you, but I haven't paid so much attention to 95% confidence limits in decades. It would make more sense to just tell everybody to take a broom with them and use it to shove everybody else out of the way. Then there was a book called God and the Pandemic, which came out this week. It was written by Tom Wright, who's a New Testament professor and a retired bishop. And among all sorts of good things in it, he made the point that we have become fearful of grief and fearful of fear, fearful of sadness, fearful of anxiety. And I thought that summed up how I've been for the last few days. Fearful of becoming fearful, anxious about not being courageous, worried about whether I will be able to stay strong. We're pretty well tooled up for social distancing. We've got a post-visit clean down routine for when our grandson comes round. We've got masks, and at the big Tesco's, they actually had this £6 for a bottle of hand wash, but 70% proof plus. So that's probably a good thing. When I go out, I'm thinking about following the government instructions, thinking about taking a broom with me so I can keep my distance. However, doing all the sensible stuff doesn't entirely hit the spot. I'm not so fearful about getting the virus. Perhaps I will be sometime. Even though I'm an old guy, I'm not so fearful. But I am fearful of becoming fearful. It made me realise that over the past couple of weeks, I've been nudged towards some help with that. You probably know this psalm that starts out, I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. It had been a useful reminder. I knew this wasn't about the wonders of nature. I knew that it was about the angle of my gaze, where I'm looking rather than looking at the news. I was, like they say in other parts of the Psalms, I was looking up. The opening lines hung around with me for so long that I spent a while poking into the rest of the Psalms. Let me just read it for a moment. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Sounds quite outrageous, doesn't it? But a few things that I found going through. Number one, in English, helper is a small word. Assistant, somebody who takes the other end of a big parcel or something like that. In Hebrew, it's much bigger. It's more than assistance, it's more than resource. It actually sounds like the Spirit. Helper, Spirit, makes sense, doesn't it? Help is a big, strong word. In the Old Testament, it's about God's deliverance and rescue. Next, and this is my main thing, there's a single word that occurs 6 times in 6 verses. Good translations like the NIV try to make the text readable, and occasionally, like this time, you don't quite get the message. 5 times it's translated as watch over, and once it's translated as keep. Actually, that misses the meaning by quite a bit. Let me explain. About 18 months ago, we were with our grandsons in Manchester on the way to the National Football Museum. At the corner of the road by the main courts, there were 2 police officers, and we had to walk past them. One smiled and waved us along. The other definitely didn't smile. His hands were full of his MP5. He was watching for something to happen. He was watching over the public. He was keeping guard. He was guarding. And that is the word that's translated as watch over and keep. It makes a difference that the Spirit, our helper, brings out the big guns on our behalf. Just focusing in for a moment. Look at verse 5, verse 6. The Lord guards you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. You'd be forgiven for thinking of a cosmic parasol to keep the sun off, but it's probably less about that than this. Ancient warfare meant that you had your shield in your left hand and your right hand was used for your sword. So having somebody guarding the exposed part of your body was pretty reassuring. Then in verse 6, there's the sun and the moon, 24/7, the complete range. It's about things you can anticipate and things that you can't. It's about external threats. It's about internal threats. When we were at the big Tesco's, we got some hand gel, we've got some masks, we do washing down, we do social distancing, we try to be pretty careful. That's not an alternative to Psalm 121. Face covering, hand washing, social distancing, into that. But just now, we need something more unless we stay at home all day, every day for the next 18 months, unless we cocoon ourselves, we're going to forget to wipe a door handle. Sometime in those 6,000 waking hours, we're going to touch something we shouldn't. However much we limit the risk, we're going to miss a bit. And then there's the fear of fear as well. That's why when we've had enough of the news, we're going to need to lift up our eyes. You know, one of the books I was reading about this psalm said that it makes sense to treat it as a journal with somebody posing a question and then reflecting on there. Sometimes, I don't journal very often, but when I do, sometimes I find it really helpful to handwrite a piece of Bible text that I need to reflect on particularly. And it might be a good idea for you to actually write out this psalm, just 8 verses, not very many words, but to write it out so that you can reflect on it and make a couple of changes. What I suggest you do is that where it talks about watching over and keep, that you actually put in the word guard, and where it talks about you, that you change it to me and to my. I think that will help you begin to grab hold of the outrageousness of what's being said here. And I'm certainly, look, let me just read it to you and show you how it works for me. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let my foot slip. He who guards me will not slumber. Indeed, he who guards Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord guards me. The Lord is my shade at my right hand. The sun will not harm me by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard me from all harm. He will guard my life. The Lord will guard my coming and going, both now and forevermore. So it's something extra. It's something extra to hand washing. It's something extra to expensive hand gel. It's something extra to face covering. It's something extra to social distancing. The fact that the Lord is the one who guards us is extra. It's outrageously extra. But that's what grace is about.